Hi everyone, my name is Alanna and I will be talking to you today about managing dogs in First Nations in Canada. And I'll start the presentation today with a land acknowledgement. I am speaking to you today from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The city of Calgary sits on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. My ancestry is mostly Irish and English, and I'd like to acknowledge the significant role my ancestors have played in the harms brought to Indigenous people through colonialism. I recognize and own the responsibility that I now have to support nations in meaningful ways based on their unique needs. Due to the nature of my work, support is usually in the form of assisting bands, when asked, with the management of their dog populations. A dear friend of mine, who is a member of Ermineskin Cree Nation, and I often reflect on how the management of a bunch of spirited dogs can support the nation's sovereignty and inherent rights. Dog population management has turned out to be one of the most meaningful ways I can contribute to reconciliation, and I'm genuinely honored to have these opportunities. So my name is Alanna Collicut. I am the Dog Care and Management Program Manager, it's a mouthful, with the Canadian Animal Task Force. My full-time role is devoted to Indigenous communities who would like assistance or resources in order to develop and implement their own community-based and sustainable and humane dog population management programs. Another member of our workshop development team is Jan Hanna. Jan is from the International Fund for Animal Welfare. She's the campaigns manager and director of the Northern Dogs Project. Jan is a dear friend and a colleague of mine who is jam-packed full of knowledge and experiences in Indigenous dog population management. She can't be here today, but she wanted to say hello to everybody. And Jan and I couldn't have completed the Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop project without Hannah and her amazing organization, Impact by Design. So now I'll just run through a quick agenda. So I'm going to start this presentation off with a very brief introduction to Indigenous peoples within Canada. I'll talk a little bit about why we developed the Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop. I'll talk a little bit about how it's going so far, and then hopefully we'll have a minute for questions at the end. So Canada has a total population of 38 million people. We have 3 distinct Indigenous populations. These are First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Together, these 3 Indigenous populations make up just under 2 million people. There are approximately 630 unique Indigenous communities in Canada. All communities were forced through colonialism to settle on reserves as directed by the Canadian federal government. And just a note of interest, these reserves are spread across Canada, not just in Northern Canada. In fact, I'm working with some of the largest nations in Canada, and they are close to the southern border with the US. In terms of socioeconomic status, Indigenous populations living on reserve make 50% less income than non-Indigenous peoples. There are well understood inequalities related to healthcare, education, and employment. So on the reserves, dogs are mostly free roaming. Anecdotally, I would estimate 70% of communities manage their dogs in a free roaming manner, while 30% of communities tether their dogs. The dogs are mostly large breed Husky, Lab, or Shepherd crosses, although we are seeing the introduction of bully breeds and small breed dogs. Access to veterinary medical care is out of reach for most on-reserve Indigenous pet guardians due to remoteness of the community, costs associated with care, and transportation. Dogs are a major public health concern regarding zoonotic diseases and dog bites. Safety issues for the dogs, like in many free-roaming dog populations across the world, are related to conflict with wildlife, livestock, other dogs, and vehicles. There are very few Indigenous communities that have dog population management programs, and even less that have any enforced laws regarding pets. Amongst the animal welfare organizations in Canada, the Canadian government, community leadership, and BAM members, there is very little understanding of the science behind dog population management. So the Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop really is about coming together with communities to find ways for dogs and people to live happier, healthier, and safer lives. This training and guide have been developed to assist animal welfare-focused individuals, teams, and organizations to support communities in the development and implementation of lasting, humane programs for dogs. It is no secret that animal welfare most often operates in a dominant culture and context, which shapes many of the behaviors, attitudes, and perspectives of animal welfare providers. These can be unhelpful or even harmful to First Nations communities, people, and dogs. As organizations committed to the welfare and well-being of animals, we see MDFN as an opportunity to do better for all of the lives we touch through our work. Our intention is for participants in the workshop to build a deeper and fresher understanding of dog population management in an Indigenous context, so that we can understand, share, and carry out this important work in ways that magnify our impact with the dogs and people we support. We've had participants in this training from a broad range of backgrounds, locations, and professions, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and we learn a lot from the insights and conversations that come from this diversity. So just a little bit of background about why and how we came to develop the Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop. In 2018, Jan and I were both receiving a lot of inquiries from people who wanted to work in this area and wanted to know how to do it. Or they were already working in this space, but they were finding it really challenging and getting stuck and not achieving their goals. We were also hearing from community members and leadership who wanted someone to come and fix their dog problems, but we also heard that they weren't necessarily comfortable with how animal welfare organizations were working in their communities and talking to their membership. Beyond the calls we were fielding, we were also seeing some troubling trends that were resulting in negative impacts amongst all stakeholder groups, including the animal welfare sector, Indigenous community leadership, community members, veterinarians, and of course the dogs. This is the graphic we use in our MDFN workshop to articulate dog population dynamics. And I'm going to use this image to illustrate the endless cycle Indigenous communities and animal welfare organizations have found themselves in. Dogs are born in the community or brought in from outside the community. While they're in the community, they may have several owners throughout the dog's life. The dogs are mostly intact and unvaccinated. When communities become concerned about overpopulation, or if there's a particularly severe human-dog incident, community leadership often reaches out to an animal welfare organization and asks them to remove the stray dogs for rehoming. These large removals of dogs takes place across Canada every single day and have resulted in serious negative impacts for all stakeholders. And this is where the dreaded vicious cycle begins. As more and more people started to work on dog issues in First Nations, we realized it would be more productive for us to design a workshop where people could discover a more robust path with their partner communities by building sustainable dog programs together. And that was how MDFN was born, with the intent of deepening our understanding of dog management and its practice, recognizing that all of us have something to learn from one another. So this is the framework that we present in our Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop. We refer to this framework during every session. On the left-hand side, you'll see it starts with foundational knowledge. So learning about dog population management and dog population dynamics, as well as learning about working with people, both in a general sense, but also in a First Nation context. The 8 purple circles in the middle, those are the 8 tools used to implement dog work, which we can do well when we make time for planning and information gathering there on the right-hand side. And ultimately, this results in sustainability. So I'll just quickly review the 9 different sessions of the Managing Dogs in First Nations workshop. So we start with an introduction to the course for our participants. This is where we do some general housekeeping, but also talk about the technology we'll be using. Then we get into the foundational knowledge of understanding dogs and their management. This is where we learn the fundamentals of dog population dynamics and population management, and how this helps us to provide the most effective services and support to Indigenous communities. In the next session, we focus on working with people. This is where we talk about respecting our First Nations community partners as the ultimate guides, mentors, and knowledge holders for their communities. The next session is where we talk about and focus on sustainability. We all know that dog work is endless, but our personal bucket of energy and hope is not. This work really does tap our reserves. So to do it well and to stay for the long haul, we need to take steps to support ourselves and create sustainable organizations and programs. Then we spend 2 sessions exploring the various types of services and supports that animal welfare organizations can provide to communities, including specific and practical guidance on what to do, how, and when. Then we provide a session on information gathering and planning. So information gathering is where we consider what information is necessary to build effective dog programs and how it can be collected in the most appropriate and ethical ways in partnership with your community contacts. And we talk about team planning in this session as well. This is where we learn about specific planning elements that can help our participants build a successful dog project, along with ways to facilitate these conversations within our teams. The last session, session number 9, is the capstone. This is where we review and discuss case studies or dive deeper into topics of interest by participants. So after much discussion and attempts at using multiple presentation formats in person, we have settled on an online format using Zoom over 9 weeks with 1 2-hour online session per week. Oh, the MDFN guide. We are immensely proud of this guide. At over 200 pages, we poured our hearts and souls into this publication. It is designed as a standalone resource, but also complements a participatory workshop. And of course, we don't just want to get things done. We want to get them done in an ethical, effective, and sustainable way. And to do that, to create this positive change, we propose that good dog population management programs are community-based, comprehensive, built using dog population dynamics, and of course, sustainable. And because we are all animal welfareists, we want anything that we are involved in to be humane as well. So we know that different folks like to learn and engage in different ways. So this means that we have created space for the different ways people learn by including reading, diagrams, listening, and doing into the curriculum. Our workshop is designed to be highly participatory. Participation is where learning happens, so we have designed the sessions to be incredibly participatory and engaging. We use technology in the weekly sessions to help us work together and think about content in new and different ways. Technology, oops, sorry about that, guys. Technology helps the training to be more interactive and enables participants to work through new concepts, and also it provides opportunities for our participants to work together. We are heavily invested and committed in creating a safe space for our participants to be brave. We know we are not all going to agree all the time, and that's part of learning and being able to hear others' perspectives and question ourselves. A little bit of discomfort can reflect healthy growth in our thinking and learning. So how is it going? It's going great. We have a pretty extensive waiting list of participants wishing to join our workshops. You see on the screen here some of the amazing feedback we are receiving pretty consistently. And I think one of the most exciting things is that we're really enjoying these workshops. We're enjoying the camaraderie that it's bringing to the Canadian animal welfare sector. And just to close out our presentation, I'd like to say a big thank you to PetSmart Charities of Canada and the International Fund for Animal Welfare for their monetary support and commitment to our workshop. Working with dogs and First Nations is not only our passion, but it's a space that has become quite full. And this workshop really allows us to be part of helping others to understand what is needed so that they can do their best. So thank you very much, and hopefully we have a minute for questions here.